When Heavy Rain landed on the PlayStation 3 back in 2010, it looked like a passion project disguised as a tech demo. Every puddle glistened, every raindrop mattered, and every close-up lingered just a little too long, like the game was whispering, "Look what we can do." I played it years ago, but I'll be honest, I wasn't in it for the story. I was trophy hunting, skipping around scenes, reloading chapters, not exactly the mindset for soaking in a noir murder mystery. Now, years later, I'm revisiting it for the plot, and right away, something stands out. The graphics haven't aged particularly well, faces slide in and out of the uncanny valley, animations lag behind emotions, and sometimes characters move like they're wading through maple syrup. But even with all that, the ambition is still there. You can tell this game wanted to be serious, grounded, real, which raises the bigger question. In a game that was clearly aiming for realism, how well did it actually do, emotionally and narratively? Now that the tech sheen has faded, does the story still hold up? Or does pulling a few threads unravel more than just the rain-soaked mystery? Let's find out, starting with the part where everything was calm until it very much wasn't. Also, if you're a die-hard Heavy Rain fan, I'm sorry in advance. The game begins not with action, but with soft sunlight, dad energy, and a level of domestic bliss so aggressively wholesome it practically comes with a warning label. Ethan Mars, an architect with the world's most symmetrical face, wakes up in a beautiful modern home with a loving wife, Grace, 2 kids, Jason and Sean, and a schedule so relaxed it practically dares you to question its realism. He wanders around the house doing light chores, sketching buildings that will never be built, and generally vibing like a man unaware that he's in the first 5 minutes of a psychological thriller. We learn today is Jason's birthday. There's a party planned. Balloons, cake, decorations, presumably guests, but the family bird dies, so naturally, Ethan and Grace decide this is the perfect time to leave the house entirely and head to the mall. For what? A last-minute birthday gift? Stress relief? A subconscious need to self-destruct? Unknown, but off they go. At the mall, Jason, who is apparently a part-time magician, vanishes within seconds, reappearing near a balloon vendor who looks like he took a wrong turn out of a Stephen King novel. Ethan buys the balloon, and before he can finish the transaction, Jason is gone again. The search begins. Ethan meanders through the mall calling, "Jason!" at intervals that make it sound like either a desperate plea or an oddly paced chant. "Jason!" Eventually, he spots Jason outside, somehow across the street and completely alone. Jason stands motionless while Ethan screams for him to stop. Then, in textbook child logic, Jason runs directly into traffic. Ethan lunges to shield him, and in a feat of physics that still defies explanation, Jason is the only one fatally hit. Ethan survives, Jason dies. Happy birthday. Ethan falls into a coma, Grace and Sean are left reeling, the birthday party presumably cancelled, and the last thing anyone saw of the cake was probably someone awkwardly putting it back into the fridge in silence. 2 years later, Ethan and Grace are separated. Ethan is depressed, but being an architect, he's been able to get himself his very own 2-story home in the city. We get to watch him microwave dinner, struggle through homework, and black out for no reason. He wakes up outside, standing in the middle of a street, clutching a tiny paper dog. It's weirdly symbolic and deeply ominous, though neither he nor the game seems interested in unpacking that just yet. Because at this point, it's time to introduce Scott Shelby, private investigator, asthmatic tough guy, and all-around walking contradiction. He visits Lauren Winter, a grieving sex worker, and tries asking polite questions about her dead son. She's skeptical, but agrees to talk, and with no real progress, Shelby leaves his card and leaves. On his way out, he has an asthma attack and also notices a disturbance in Lauren's room after another man entered. Shelby intervenes and protects her from her abusive man-friend in a surprisingly competent fistfight, and then he leaves again. We now move over to a crime scene where we meet the only character in this game who's heard of forensic science, FBI profiler Norman Jayden. He scans the crime scene with his high-tech RE glasses, gathering clues while occasionally gritting his teeth through withdrawal symptoms that range from mild headaches to spontaneous jazz hand tremors. When he's done collecting origami killer evidence from a muddy hill and a dead body, he heads off to the station to continue not being taken seriously. Meanwhile, Ethan, still firmly stuck in denial stage of trauma, visits a psychiatrist, Dr. Dupre. The doc insists he's not to blame for Jason's death. Ethan disagrees hard. The scene ends with Ethan continuing to brood in his grayscale lifestyle while sitting inches away from, what is this, a window? Also, there's a creeping suspicion here that Dr. Dupre is more of a set piece than a functioning psychiatrist, since he never seems alarmed that Ethan's blackouts end in public spaces with strange origami. Later, Ethan takes Sean for a day at the park. Sean swings, seesaws, and other normal father-son things. It's the kind of outing that says, maybe things are finally turning around. At the end, Ethan buys Sean a ride on the carousel, and promptly blacks out again. Apparently, the carousel is hypnotic. Hours later, Ethan regains consciousness in the middle of the street, somehow having avoided being flattened by traffic. Ethan panics and runs back to the park where somehow no adult has noticed an unsupervised child missing from a literal moving carousel. He finds Sean's backpack, stares at it dramatically, and then leaves it there, because screw forensic evidence, right? Ethan returns home, finds nothing, runs back into the street and discovers, surprise, another origami figure in his hand. The plot thickens, or at least folds. Ethan collapses, crying. Coming back to Norman, our FBI agent arrives at the precinct only to be immediately used as a personal valet by Captain Perry, who asks Norman to tie his tie like he's a 7-year-old at a wedding. Is this an intimidation tactic? A weird power move? Unknown, but Norman complies before checking in on the press conference. More info about the origami killer. Okay. When we talk to the secretary later about our office, we enjoy a long close-up shot of a promotional gold watch. Afterwards, he is shown to his new office and sets up his augmented reality crime database, and depending on your controller input, either resists or gives in to taking tryptocane. Spoiler, in my version, the addiction wins. Thanks, controller. Meanwhile, Ethan files a missing child report. Blake and his assistant seem about as invested in the case as they are in choosing what to have for lunch. Grace shows up and Ethan breaks the bad news that, on top of Sean vanishing under his watch, Sean might be the victim of the origami killer. She is understandably furious because now, if Sean is found, some might call it heroic, others call it a strong case for CPS intervention. Back to Scott. He goes to a convenience store and has a chat with a guy named Hassan, the store clerk who is apparently a father of another victim. What starts as a friendly conversation takes a sharp turn when an armed robber bursts in. Scott sneaks up behind him and knocks him out with a textbook stealth maneuver rarely taught in PI school. Grateful, Hassan gives Shelby a shoebox with an origami lizard inside. Shelby accepts it like that's a completely normal object to be given in a murder investigation. Now, out of left field, we meet Madison Paige. She wakes up, showers, and just when things seem too slow, a home invasion kicks off. Madison gets attacked, and just when she's about to die, she wakes up. It was all a nightmare. Of course it was, because this game just loves using trauma as entertainment and dreams as misdirection. That's literally the end of the scene. We come back to Ethan at home, which is surrounded by the press. He finds a creepy anonymous letter with a poem about missing children and a train station locker ticket. Conveniently, he decides not to call the police. Instead, he sneaks out the backyard like a man ducking out of a bad date and heads to the train station. At the station, Ethan's agoraphobia kicks in hard. He sees frozen people. He hallucinates Jason. He trips over imaginary humans, but somehow he makes it through the chaos and finds himself near the luggage lockers. He passes through the metal detector and eventually makes his way to a locker where he finds a shoebox. He doesn't open it yet. He saves that part for later, because nothing says urgent child rescue like emotional pacing. Instead of going home, Ethan checks in at a motel. He opens the shoebox and finds 5 origami animals, a phone, and plot twist, a gun, which the metal detector somehow didn't detect on the way out. TSA 0, origami killer 1. Also a video of Sean trapped under a sewer grate with rising water, just to make things extra theatrical. The message is simple. Prove how far you're willing to go. The first test? The bear. A trial of courage. Apparently, the killer has set up a twisted personal development program. Ethan grabs the phone, takes the gun, and drives off into the rainy unknown, not to call the police, not to track the video signal, but to do whatever this mysterious paper-folding psychopath demands, because nothing screams good parenting like going full Batman vigilante without the gadgets. So by this point in the game, we've transitioned from grieving dad simulator to a full-blown serial killer scavenger hunt. Back to the FBI's resident tech-savvy profiler, Jayden, kicks things off with a PowerPoint that could have saved lives weeks ago if anyone at the precinct actually listened. He lays out a clear pattern. The origami killer drowns little boys when rainfall hits 6 inches. It's precise, data-driven, and promptly ignored by Detective Blake and Captain Perry, who both continue to treat him like he's a kid playing with VR goggles instead of a federal agent. Good times. In any case, they have their first lead, Nathaniel Williams, a situation that takes a sharp turn from mental health check-in to gunpoint standoff with the man screaming about the Antichrist. In my playthrough, Norman shoots him because subtle de-escalation tactics apparently take a back seat to twitch reflexes. Whoops. Meanwhile, Private Eye Scott Shelby enters a house where a baby is crying unattended because the mother is unconscious in a blood-filled bathtub. No big deal. Instead of calling for help like literally any functioning adult, he just jumps into dad mode, cradles the baby, and resuscitates the mother himself. Then, having bonded with her over her near-death experience and lingering trauma, he casually asks questions where we learn she is the mother of another child victim whose father went missing shortly after. The father left a cell phone behind, and the questioning ends when she tells Scott where the phone is. He grabs it and leaves. This is what passes for investigative work here. Back with Ethan, we reach trial number 1, the bear. He picks up a car that's supposedly been in storage for 2 years, but is in mint condition and somehow still being test-driven monthly. The task? Drive 5 miles against traffic on the highway, because apparently the origami killer also writes for Jackass. After flipping the car in spectacular fashion, Ethan is rewarded with news that a key for the glove box is inside the GPS. Inside the glove box, a chip. On the chip, a freshly recorded video of Sean, stored on a chip that's also been sitting in a locked car for 2 years. Science? Logic? File those under rainy day mysteries. Ethan drags his burnt, battered body back to the motel where he can't quite make it past the finish line. Luckily, Madison Paige, reporter, insomniac, amateur nurse, just happens to be renting a room at the same exact motel. She patches him up, probes his secrets, and then tiptoes out after finding absolutely nothing suspicious. Not long after, Ethan busts out the shoebox to find its next murderous origami assignment. Now over in local produce news, Norman tracks down another suspect, Miroslav Korda, leading to the most chaotic chase scene in a game full of them. It includes flying chickens, pepperoni distractions, and a meat locker brawl. Korda gets knocked out with a blunt object, possibly a crowbar, though it's hard to tell. Blake catches up. The chickens remain traumatized. Back on the north side of things, Lauren Winter shows up unannounced at Scott Shelby's apartment/office and basically demands to become his sidekick. Scott reluctantly agrees, which might be the first bad decision he's made in front of us, but certainly not the last. Together they crash Gordy Kramer's Rich Kid Rager, where the music is loud, the champagne is flowing, and nobody questions the presence of a burly ex-cop and a former escort wandering the halls. Scott corners Gordy, who vaguely implies involvement in the murders. Security tries to intervene, but Scott dispatches them with surprising ease. Gordy threatens him with money and power, then watches cartoons like a psychopath. And Scott leaves, having gathered zero evidence but somehow still progressing the case. Back at the pain dungeon known as Ethan's storyline, he takes on trial number 2, the Butterfly. He arrives at an abandoned power plant. He crawls through broken glass in a claustrophobic tunnel while lighting matches like it's a camping trip from hell, then navigates a live electrical grid without dying. Somehow it works. He gets a new chip with another video of Sean, still alive, still not rescued. It's fine. Totally fine. Later on, Madison finds Ethan unconscious. She nurses him back to health, again. At this point, it's not so much Florence Nightingale as it is Weekend at Bernie's, but with more antiseptic. When he wakes up, Ethan insists she leaves, because nothing says thanks for saving me like a cold shoulder and third-degree burns. Madison shrugs and walks out. Ethan opens the box for trial number 3, the Lizard. We don't know where this is all headed yet, but one thing is becoming clear. Every character is either bleeding, hallucinating, or violating at least one part of a real-world crime scene procedure, possibly all three. I think this is where the game might escalate into its most chaotic section yet. For me, this is where I found that the narrative now fully commits to testing our suspension of disbelief and our ability to navigate quick-time events while morally spiraling. Back at the police station, Corda, the guy from the meat locker fight, is finally questioned. Turns out, he wasn't fleeing the cops because he drowned children in sewers, he just had a pre-existing warrant. Corda's alibis check out, but it does beg the question, did no one bother to do this basic vetting earlier? Grace, in a refreshing moment of rational concern, shows up to inform police that her ex-husband has been experiencing memory-erasing blackouts right before news reports of children going missing. Somehow, this hadn't occurred to anyone on the force. Norman Jayden listens with quiet intensity. Blake, presumably, thinks about lunch. The detectives visit Ethan's psychiatrist, Dr. Dupre. Blake handles the situation with all the grace and legality of a sledgehammer. After some light physical coercion, Dupre admits that Ethan suffers from dissociation and severe trauma, and yes, one of those sessions ended with Ethan leaving an origami figure behind. Meanwhile, Scott Shelby visits Charles Kramer, the moneyed and menacing father of suspect Gordy Kramer. The two men talk on a private golf range because what better place to discuss child murders than while practicing your short game? Charles doesn't confess, but his veiled threats practically come with subtitles. Back to Ethan, he receives his next test from the origami killer. Amputate a finger. In a delightful sequence that doubles as an OSHA violation, players choose from an assortment of hardware store tools. I went with wire cutters. After some screaming, he retrieves the next clue, cleverly hidden in the floor under the table. The cops arrive at Ethan's location, so does Madison, who miraculously senses the impending police raid. She enters the building, finds Ethan in pain, and together they flee. Blake and Norman arrive in time to dramatically kick down a door that's already empty. Ethan and Madison outrun several cops, dive through traffic, and board a subway car like this is Uncharted Depressed Dad Edition. Back at the motel, Ethan confesses that he may be the killer. Madison seems mildly concerned. When he's finally alone again, he opens the shoebox for info on the next trial, the Shark. Now checking in on Norman, who, like any reasonable FBI agent who's just killed one of his suspects and wrongfully detained another, decides it's time to unwind with a little Ari. He plays some virtual piano and uncovers a critical lead, a 1983 Chevy tied to one of the murder scenes. The vehicle turns out to be stolen, and while suspicion once pointed to a local guy known as Mad Jack, charges were dropped. Still, Norman decides to pay him a visit because if you're chasing a serial killer and a guy literally calls himself Mad Jack, it's probably worth a look. Afterwards, Norman wrestles through another crypto withdrawal, this time resisting the urge with a triumphant flush and a trembling jawline that screams, FBI? Maybe functional. Scott and Lauren visit Manfred, a typewriter repairman who may as well have been wearing a murder victim name tag. Predictably, while Scott looks away, Manfred ends up dead. In a panic, Scott wipes down the shop but misses a few fingerprints. This might be the fastest this police department has ever acted. They had to scrub down the place and pin the fingerprints in record time because the next scene is Scott at the station being questioned, lightly, for a mysterious death. Scott plays dumb and somehow walks away with nothing more than a scolding and a suggestion to call the police next time. Moving on. Lauren, who is starting to show more insight than anyone else in the game, considers quitting. Scott convinces her to stick around by making her feel slightly guilty. Time for trial number 4. Ethan is now asked to kill a man. He knocks on a door, and when the guy answers, Ethan pulls a gun on him and shoves his way in. The man responds with a shotgun, launching a frantic chase through the house and into a little girl's bedroom, because why not raise the stakes further? Ultimately, Ethan chooses not to kill. He instead pistol whips the man unconscious. Blood loss, guilt, trauma, and now armed assault. Ethan's getting the full hero's journey. Madison visits a doctor under the pretense of needing sleep meds, which in this game means I need a new lead. While he's grabbing the meds, she snoops around. She finds a random card. Blue Lagoon, with the word Paco written on the back. She finds other things, but I guess this is what's important. The doctor, who appears to moonlight as a horror movie villain, knocks her out and ties her to a murder table. Madison escapes and defeats him with a literal heart punch from a power drill. I'm just going to leave that sentence as is. Let's check in on Norman. He tracks the stolen Chevy to a scrapyard owned by Mad Jack, who is the exact kind of guy you expect to find in a place called Mad Jack's. Jayden finds blood, clues, and a makeshift acid bath before Mad Jack pulls a gun on him. Cue another cinematic brawl. Norman wins, arrests Jack, and leaves one step closer to connecting the dots. Back at Scott's apartment, Lauren showers while Scott makes an omelet despite promising scrambled eggs. Afterwards, they cross-reference names from Manfred's ledger with an Origami magazine subscription list, landing on a new suspect, John Shepard. There's just one issue. He's been dead for decades. Scott and Lauren visit John Shepard's grave. A local caretaker shares a tragic tale. John drowned in a construction site while his brother failed to get help. The brother was later adopted. The story feels suspiciously aligned with the Origami Killer's MO. Just as we're leaving, Charles Kramer arrives with flowers, which is either heartfelt or damning. Probably both. We go back to Madison, and because the phrase sensibly dressed woman doesn't exist in this universe, she infiltrates the Blue Lagoon nightclub via sexy disguise. She dances her way into Paco's private room, endures a striptease threat, then knocks him out and tortures him for answers. It works. He reveals the name John Shepard. Again, a dead child, but Madison doesn't know that yet. As Madison's leaving the club, Norman arrives looking for Paco. He finds him, shot dead. Before he can react, the killer ambushes him, leading to another high-intensity fight that ends with Norman crashing into a fish tank, because nothing says detective thriller like glass shards and tropical fish. Afterwards, Norman RAs the scene, confirming Paco's identity and collecting more puzzle pieces to the killer's plan. As the web tightens, the narrative shifts from a story of grief and mystery to one of compounding mistakes, delayed realizations, and characters unknowingly circling the truth. At this point, everyone is exhausted, paranoid, and potentially armed. Even the Origami is starting to look dangerous. We return to Ethan, gently marinating in his own guilt on a motel floor. Madison walks in, tells him about her very normal experience pretending to seduce and almost being assaulted by a mobster. Just kidding, she just says she has proof he's not the killer. Ethan responds the only way a traumatized dad would, with a kiss. And then, a motel fling, because nothing says my child is getting buried in water like one last emotionally confused romantic interlude. Afterward, Ethan wakes up and finds Madison's journal stuff because apparently she travels with those in her purse like an emotional time bomb. Ethan feels betrayed, Madison insists she's just trying to help, and Ethan responds by saying absolutely nothing helpful in return. She leaves to check out of the motel, which is now surrounded by cops. Madison, thinking quickly, sneaks into the front office and calls Ethan to warn him. Ethan escapes through a second-story balcony like he's Spider-Man, but more depressed. The chase ends with Ethan cornered on a rooftop. His solution? Jump off. He walks it off like a champ and steals a taxi. No one stops him. In fact, no one seems to remember what he looks like despite multiple APBs. Meanwhile, Scott arrives home to find Lauren with Charles Kramer and some goons. He's knocked out via pistol whip and wakes up in a car sinking in a lake, because apparently Kramer's backup plan to don't talk is attempt double homicide. Scott breaks the window with sheer determination, pulls Lauren out, and swims them to safety. Lauren, who was unconscious and almost drowned, apparently agrees to lend Scott her car. This is the exact level of trust you give to a man you just met 2 days ago who's drenched and possibly concussed. Scott, now fully embracing unhinged vigilante detective, drives Lauren's car through the gates and a wall of Charles Kramer's mansion. It's unclear what his plan was besides chaos. After gunning down an entire private security team, Scott confronts Kramer, who admits he covered up a death, but not the deaths. He knows about the Shepard brothers, he knows about the mother, but when his heart gives out, Scott just watches. Cool. That's 2 deaths he's let happen in this playthrough. 3 if you count his car, 4 if you count Lauren's. Meanwhile, Madison visits John Shepard's mother in a hospital. Ann Shepard has Alzheimer's, which allows the narrative to casually loop until it decides to drop exposition. Madison, in an act of journalistic patience, usually reserved for wildlife documentarians,
Brown bears loves fishy. Brown bears loves God, why am I having so much trouble saying brown?
Maybe it's the two B's in brown bears. Try something different.
I got it, I'm ready. Okay. Red bears love fish.
Madison shows her various mementos until Anne finally remembers her sons. She reveals John's brother was named. Nope, we don't get to know yet, but Madison is surprised as if she had been dealing with this person. Anyways, Ethan arrives at his final trial, which appears to be sponsored by IKEA's modern dystopia line. There's a chandelier, an elegant table, and enough webcams to populate a reality show. To prove his love for Sean, Ethan is asked to drink poison. The device helpfully explains he has 1 hour to live. Very considerate. Ethan chugs it like expired kombucha and receives the final clue. He runs out, trying to piece together an address from a bunch of stuff that was definitely in this stolen taxi. We now enter the hope you guessed right portion of the story. Norman's buddy tells him the case is closed, even though they still haven't caught the main suspect, and the killer is still presumably killing. Jayden, who's never followed protocol before, ignores him. He takes a hit of trypticane and returns to Ari. Jayden finally notices something from the nightclub footage. The killer wore a police-issued watch. Tracks down gun registration and receipt records, narrowing down the suspect pool to one person with property at the docks. It took the FBI days of failed hunches, but a wristwatch and a spreadsheet finally cracked the code. We then get a scene where Scott and Lauren are at a train station. He promises to explain everything once it's over. They kiss. It is entirely unclear why. Now we suddenly get a flashback that I guess reveals the full story of the young boys. Young bro watched his brother drown while their father ignored his pleas. John's dying words?
Don't forget about this guy.
Scott. Scott Shelby. The guy we've been playing as. The guy who's been investigating himself. Surprise? I'll get into that later. Anyways, don't forget about me, Scotty, which Scott honored by growing up to drown a bunch of other kids, a strategy commonly referred to as missing the point. Scott, now in the present, quietly burns all the evidence he's gathered, a symbolic act of closure or arson, hard to say. Madison, who apparently downloaded Detective Simulator 2000, somehow deduces where Scott lives. She breaks in and discovers his hidden room of orchids, a live surveillance feed, and a personal laptop, all of which are just sitting there. The password to access Sean's location? Max, the name of Scott's childhood dog. We learned this while visiting Mom. It works because, of course it does. Shelby returns, locks her in, and sets the apartment on fire. Madison escapes and ends up hiding in a refrigerator, which, fun fact, was apparently a popular thing to do until the 1956 Refrigeration Safety Act. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, she hides in a fridge. The apartment explodes. Madison survives, and she immediately calls Ethan, who doesn't answer, because of course he doesn't. We come back to Ethan, whose guess is correct. He reaches the warehouse and finds Sean in a water trap. As he tries to break the grate open, Scott appears. They have a heart-to-heart with a gun, which is how all the best fatherly moments happen. Just as Scott is about to shoot Ethan, Norman appears and tackles him. Ethan rescues Sean, resuscitating him with CPR and a healthy amount of screaming. Madison shows up, fails to put on a motorcycle show for the cops, and then runs in and warns Ethan that the police are prepared to shoot him on sight. They hatch a plan to walk out slowly holding a child. Risky, but effective. Meanwhile, Norman and Scott brawl on a conveyor belt above a grinder of some sort. The police below remain blissfully unaware of the killer hanging 10 feet above them. The fight ends with Scott dangling over the blades. He begs for help. Norman lets him drop. It's unclear whether this is justice or just saving time on paperwork. But that's the end of the game. Ethan and Sean move into a new home, hopefully nowhere near water or construction sites. Madison publishes a book titled Heavy Rain. How cute. Norman becomes a media darling and either kicks his trypticane habit or hides it better. Lauren visits Scott's grave, spits on it, and walks off. arguably the most earned action in the game. Now that the storm has passed, Sean is alive, and the villain has been tenderized like grocery store ground beef, let's take a moment to reflect, because I have a lot of questions. And yes, I'm fully aware that Heavy Rain has dozens of branching paths and multiple endings. I know choices matter. I know outcomes can vary wildly depending on who dies, who kisses who, and whether or not you successfully press X to scream Jason. But this isn't a dissertation on the butterfly effect. This is about my playthrough, the one where I did my best, mostly kept people alive, and still ended up feeling like I just watched a very expensive fever dream get pushed down a flight of stairs. I'm not going back to rewatch every permutation either. This game doesn't have a skip scene button, and sitting through the same slow pan over a dripping warehouse for the 5th time is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, or even Scott Shelby. So what follows is based solely on my experience, my personal descent into rain-soaked madness. If yours was different, great, hold it close, guard it with your life. But I'm here to talk about what I saw, and what I saw raised some serious narrative questions. Not the philosophical kind like, what does it mean to be a father, or how far would you go for your child? No, I mean logistical questions, structural questions. The kind of questions you start asking when your brain tries to make sense of what it just witnessed and realizes the math doesn't math. Questions like, how did Scott Shelby not monologue once while alone? This man kills children, torments grieving fathers, commits multiple homicides, and never once lets us hear an inner monologue like, I'm doing this for a reason. Instead, we get scenes of him sitting in an office and sighing wistfully at crime scenes he made. That's like watching a magician burn down a stage, then shrug and start sweeping. What about Ethan's blackouts? Did Ethan actually black out or wake up holding origami? Because either Scott was breaking into Ethan's house and gently tucking paper into his unconscious hands, or Ethan was crafting while dissociating. And if it's the latter, why did no one consider checking his browser history for how to fold dogs like an origami killer? Madison Paige, actual journalist or chaos goblin? She has no assignment, no publication, no editor, just vibes and a motorcycle. Her investigative process appears to be 1. Find sad man, 2. Sleep with sad man, and 3. Solve the case of the origami killer. Because somehow, through sheer instinct and a total disregard for privacy, she uncovers the killer's identity before the actual FBI. Speaking of FBI, Norman Jayden, best cop or worst FBI agent ever? He has an addiction problem, a virtual office, and an AI assistant that somehow doesn't flag the former cop with the suspicious watch as a lead until late in the game. He's constantly one step behind, but also the only person who does anything resembling police work. He also gets into a market brawl in loafers, so that's something. Here's a big one. What exactly was Scott Shelby's endgame? Let's break this down. 1. Shelby kills children in elaborate drowning traps. 2. He gives their fathers a series of Saw-adjacent death trials. 3. He watches them, gives them everything they need to do the trials. 4. When one father gets to the end, he tries to shoot him. So, what was the goal? Was this a redemption arc? An experiment? A revenge fantasy? Or just an elaborate excuse to be both the killer and the detective, like a child playing both cops and robbers in the same poorly lit sandbox? His entire plan collapses under the weight of its own contradiction. He's trying to find a father who would go through hell for his kid, and when he does, he gets jealous? Gives up? Shoots him anyway? Did he want validation? Closure? Or just one more scene of unnecessary tension before diving into industrial machinery? How did Madison find Scott's apartment with no leads? The game provides zero breadcrumbs for us to witness, no address, no receipts, no lucky guess. She just shows up. Either she's psychic or off-screen she asked the landlord, "Hey, is there a guy that looks like a grumpy peanut and smells like orchids?" Also, why did no one ever call the police? Ethan's on the run, Norman's off the case, Madison out of all people ends up on an actual trail, but no one, not a single person, picks up a phone. It's as if 911 was wiped from existence, or everyone collectively agreed that emergency response was too mainstream. Also, why didn't the cops ever notice they were cops? Like, did the ground units take a smoke break when everybody else went up on the roof? Okay, back to Scott. If the goal was to test fathers, why not just ask them questions? Scott's entire methodology depends on elaborate illegal escape rooms, but if all he wanted was proof of love, maybe a questionnaire would have worked. Would you A, sacrifice yourself for your child, B, let your child drown, or C, refuse to answer and get electrocuted anyway? It's less dramatic, sure, but it also doesn't require abandoned buildings and fake poison procurement. What was the budget for all of this? GPS-enabled origami, dozens of video cameras, custom trap doors, power at an abandoned power station. Who is funding this? Does he have an online shop? A donation system? Is this all part of some dark-themed startup we never got to see? As you can see, my mind is a little all over the place with this one. So many inconsistencies, so much drama, so little logic. So my plan? The best I could come up with is to deconstruct what I feel are the biggest narrative failures in each of the main characters' stories, and see if, in doing so, the game says anything coherent at all, or if it just collapses like one of Ethan's blackouts, except less believable. Let's talk about Ethan Mars and what it's like to be a grieving father with a teleportation problem. At first glance, Ethan is your standard emotionally fragile dad protagonist. He's an architect, he loves his sons, and he reacts to tragedy the way a restoration hardware catalog would. Lots of gray, minimal words, and a sinking couch of sadness. Fair enough, trauma changes people. But just when you expect a story about coping, healing, and maybe a therapist or two, the game shifts gears and suddenly Ethan's waking up drenched in the rain, missing time, and plot twist, a perfectly folded origami figure just chilling in his grasp. It's jarring, it's dramatic, and it makes absolutely no psychological sense. So, why? The game leans into the idea that Ethan's blackouts are the byproduct of PTSD, that he's so dissociative, he loses all awareness and wakes up far away from where he started, drenched, dazed, and holding ominous clues to murders he didn't commit. Which, okay, dissociation is real, but usually it doesn't come with GPS rerouting, meteorological effects, and branded calling cards. Let's apply some logic. If someone dissociates due to trauma, do they A, stare into space and maybe forget parts of their commute? Or B, wake up in the middle of a street we've never seen them visit holding handcrafted origami like a sadistic pen pal sent it? The story asks us to pick B, and then never explains how or why it happens twice, on the same street, with the same symbolism, but no in-world mechanism. That's not trauma. That's narrative misdirection wearing trauma like a trench coat. Now here's the part where the game almost becomes brilliant. It makes you suspect yourself. Ethan isn't the killer. There's no twist where he's the origami killer. He doesn't even moonlight as a morally confused street artist. But the game lets you spiral just like he does. You start asking the same questions. Am I doing this? What happened during the blackouts? Why do I feel so guilty for things I didn't do? That's great emotional design, but narratively, it's running a scam. Because none of it pays off. There's no explanation, no therapeutic revelation, not even a lazy dream sequence to hint at why Ethan wakes up with murder souvenirs. The moment it's no longer useful for suspense, the game just stops bringing it up. If you're designing a twist, great, but if your twist depends on character behavior that only exists to mislead the audience and is never explained or resolved, that's not clever. That's narrative gaslighting. And it's the kind that falls apart the moment someone replays the game and realizes, wait, this scene had no reason to happen. Constructively, how about not build red herrings out of major psychological events you're not willing to resolve? You can mislead your audience, but you also owe them a breadcrumb or two to justify the mislead later. Let's do a mental roleplay. You're in the writer's room. You say, what if Ethan keeps waking up in the middle of a road with origami? And someone says, okay, why? And the room just moves on. That's what it feels like. And sure, you can argue that this is meant to immerse the player in Ethan's unreliable perception. He's grieving, he's traumatized, and trauma doesn't come with tidy timelines. True. But here's the rub. We're not just watching Ethan, we're playing him. You can't both ask the player to embody the character and deny them the access to the cause and effect of their own actions. That's not storytelling. It's more like editorializing after the fact. So what's the final judgment on Ethan Mars? From a thematic standpoint, his arc is compelling. He's a grieving father trapped in a world that won't tell him what's real. That's interesting. That's painful. That's worth exploring. But from a structural standpoint, it's a sleight of hand trick that doesn't hold up under repeat viewings. There's no psychological profile that explains Ethan's behavior, no in-universe cause for the blackouts, no satisfying resolution, just vibes, rain, and the lingering feeling that the game wanted your confusion more than your understanding. It's like watching Inception, except they forgot to mention, show, or even introduce the concept of the totems. So next time you wake up drenched, confused, and holding a tiny folded animal, just remember, you're not the killer. You're just in a story that wants you to think you are. Now, if Ethan's story was one long hallucination in search of answers, Norman Jayden's arc is something else entirely. Imagine you're an elite FBI profiler. You graduate top of your class. You wear gloves like you're allergic to injustice. You're dispatched to a serial child killer investigation so grim it makes 7 look like a school play. What do you pack? A notepad? A standard issue badge? Nope. You show up with experimental AR goggles, a robotic glove, and a prescription for trypticane that sounds like a rejected DJ name. This is Norman Jayden, the only character in Heavy Rain who looks like he wandered in from Deus Ex, got lost, and decided to stay. Let's unpack him carefully. He might be fragile. Starting with Ari, added reality interface. It can scan blood spatters, reconstruct footprints in 3D, and apparently translate existential dread into glowing polygons. Here's the issue. Nobody in the story ever questions how Ari works or why the FBI greenlit it. There's no briefing scene, no tech support line, no subplot about budget approval. It just exists, like a subscription service you forgot to cancel. If you introduce a game-changing tool, lean into it. Show Jayden struggling with calibration errors. Have local cops gasp and ask for a demo. Let us feel the tension between cutting-edge tech and real-world constraints. Instead, Ari floats through scenes unchallenged, making the investigation feel like a theme park ride rather than a hunt for a killer. Now what about trypticane? Let's assume the FBI is cool with high-ranking agents being addicted to designer amphetamines with names like rejected Marvel villains. Fine, we've all had a rough week. But trypticane, the drug Jayden uses to counteract the side effects of Ari, isn't just underexplained, it's narratively unsupervised. Why does he need it? What are its long-term effects? Who approved it? And why does it come in a capsule that he snorts like an allergy medication? The story's answer is basically, don't worry about it. It's not a real addiction arc. It's not even a commentary on technology dependency. It's just a plot seasoning. Add one brooding addiction to taste. And yes, it works in the moment. The hallucinations, the creeping dread, the uncertainty about what's real. It creates tension. But it's tension without architecture. A vibe that looks meaningful until you ask even one follow-up question. You know, like a detective might. Aside from that, Norman's Ari database profile rules Ethan Mars unlikely to be the killer, so he never really questions him. Instead of grilling the grieving father caught at multiple crime scenes, Norman files him under false positive and moves on to pollen counts. You've armed your protagonist with Minority Report level tools. Now use them to interrogate everyone. Have Norman challenge Ethan's alibi, demand context for wet clothing, or cross-reference origami patterns. Make him earn that top-of-his-class reputation through incisive questioning, not database queries that conveniently clear key suspects. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Norman Jayden only works if you view him as a metaphor for the player's own confusion. He's not a character with agency. He's a high-tech periscope pointed at the chaos. His tools promise clarity but deliver static. His addiction signals depth but lacks a diagnosis. His database filters keep him from acting, so he just observes. If you want Norman to anchor the story, give him moments of real confrontation and doubt. Let him second-guess the tech he relies on. Let him fail spectacularly and learn something. Right now, he stands still while the plot drifts around him. Norman Jayden isn't inconsistent. He's consistent with a story that refuses to commit. He's a futuristic detective trapped in a script that privileges emotional drama over investigative rigor. He doesn't evolve, he devolves into background noise. His RE glasses don't solve mysteries, they obscure them. His addiction doesn't deepen character, it dilutes plausibility. In a story of rain-soaked tension, Norman's arc feels dry, like a demo reel for gadgets we never truly learned to believe in. And until the writing lets him use his own tools and instincts, he'll remain the ultimate cautionary tale, the investigator who watched a mystery unfold without ever deciding to solve it. Let's move on to our supposed journalist. Imagine you're an investigative reporter. You're supposed to dig for truth, protect sources, and publish exposés, not play bedside nurse and amateur detective to a suspected child killer. But in Heavy Rain, Madison Paige does all of that and still somehow never files a single story. Let's break down where her arc shines and where it trips over its own press pass, starting with the first meeting. So Madison meets Ethan in a motel. He's in pain, paranoid, possibly drugged, definitely hiding something. A seasoned journalist might call headquarters, alert the sheriff, or at least take some notes. Instead, Madison's first move is, want a shower? Followed by, want company? And then, voila, romance. Real investigative work thrives on ethical tension. Show Madison debating her duty. Does she protect her story or protect a man who might be innocent? Even a brief newsroom scene, an editor's skeptical glance, or her recording thoughts on tape would ground her choices. Right now, she sleeps with a fugitive without so much as a byline. Late in the game, Madison just knows Scott Shelby is the origami killer. No database searches, no bribes, no stakeouts. She strolls into his apartment, rifles through drawers, and unearths the smoking gun. If Madison truly cracked the case, show her earning it. Anne Shepard whispering something into her ear doesn't count. Assuming she was given Scott's name, there's been no indication to lead us to believe that she even knows who this is. Some better options? A montage of her pounding the pavement, hacking public records, or using legitimate contacts would justify her sudden omniscience. As written, she's a narrative shortcut, an invisible behind-the-scenes journalist whose on-screen avatar only kisses and comforts. So what is Madison's arc really about? If we remove the label of journalist and look at her behavior objectively, she serves three key functions. 1. Caretaker. She patches up Ethan repeatedly, both physically and emotionally. 2. Romantic interest. She gives Ethan something to live for besides his son, which is ethically complicated. 3. Plot propellant. When the story stalls, she finds the next lead. How? Doesn't matter, she just does. Her insomnia and PTSD are dropped like yesterday's headlines. Her profession is a prop. She doesn't investigate, she reacts. That's not an arc, it's a conveyor belt. To deepen her arc, Madison needs agency. Let her challenge Ethan's story, pursue leads independently, or confront Shelby before the final reveal. Show us the journalist in her, not just the surrogate for player guidance. Madison materializes with key intel at every turn, yet there's no on-screen evidence of her doing the legwork. No whispered calls, no stakeout sequences, No documentary footage. Rationalize her discoveries with scenes of her using real tools, scanning local classifieds, cross-referencing social media, or interviewing secondary characters. Without this, her knowledge feels like a developer console command rather than earned journalism. Madison is not a flawed hero. She's a failsafe, a clutch character the plot leans on when investigations stall or emotions threaten to drown the pacing. Her romance with Ethan isn't messy character work, it's emotional glue. Her sleuthing isn't journalism, it's convenient exposition. If Heavy Rain had given Madison real reporting beats, like editorial pushback, investigative roadblocks, ethical dilemmas, she could have been a much more compelling character. Instead, she's empathy in a leather jacket, a human cheat code pulling the story forward. Sometimes that keeps a game from stalling, but it also reminds us how much richer things might have been if her pen and press badge actually mattered. Now, while Madison was busy playing Florence Nightingale, someone else was busy playing God. Imagine you're a hard-boiled private eye. You comfort grieving families, dust for clues, and promise justice. Meanwhile, you're the one who planted the knife in their loved one's chest, yet somehow you walk into a mother's living room, tightrope across your own guilt, and swear you'll catch that bastard. Welcome to the world of Scott Shelby. Except, this isn't really a story about a killer's dual identity. It's about a game that expects you not to ask how any of this could realistically happen without anyone, noticing. Scott Shelby's role is emotionally rich on paper. He's both the cause of the grief and the man pretending to heal it. The setup is clever, until you realize that the writing never commits to exploring how this level of compartmentalization is even remotely sustainable. Shelby's behavior is explained away with denial, as though that's a character trait and not a story device. If you're looking for inner conflict, you'll find the emotional equivalent of a screensaver. Gestures of guilt, but no underlying operating system. There's no foreshadowing of breakdown, no sense that he's struggling. His scenes play out like he's auditioning for Undercover Boss, Serial Killer Edition, and we're just supposed to buy that. But the deeper question, the one the game doesn't want you to ask, is this. Why are these families even giving him evidence in the first place? Take a second to think about it. Hassan's shoebox contains an origami figure. Lauren has a typed letter that becomes central to the typewriter evidence. The mother with an infant has the killer's burner phone. These aren't knickknacks, they're forensic evidence. And yet, when a raspy stranger with no badge and a trench coat knocks, their response is, "Sure, take this thing that could help the police solve my child's murder." That's not character depth, that's a plot shortcut disguised as closure. Now, let's be honest. Heavy Rain doesn't set up a twist. It withholds information until it's ready to throw a bucket of cold water on your face. Shelby has no tell, no subtle breadcrumbs, no glance too long at a victim's photo, no moment where he stares at origami like it's trying to talk to him. He is, for all intents and purposes, a flawless red herring. Except, he's not a red herring. He's the guy. From a player experience perspective, this isn't misdirection. It's narrative sleight of hand. Information deliberately omitted so the twist can feel earned in hindsight, even when nothing actually supports it. The twist hits hard, yes, but only because the game never gave you the chance to see it coming. And when you do go back, armed with the knowledge of who Shelby really is, you start seeing the seams, like how every grieving parent somehow has an artifact from the killer, and none of them ever thought to call the cops. The entire detective plot hinges on the assumption that critical evidence was just waiting in these homes like forgotten mail, and Shelby, world's most forgettable PI, was the first guy they trusted with it. The game wants you to believe that Shelby chose a detective role as a way to manage guilt, to relive control, or to create a duality between chaos and order. That's thematically rich, on paper, again. But let's look at this through an objective lens. If your killer is trying to avoid detection, why would he re-enter the investigation professionally? Why would he voluntarily knock on the doors of his victims' families and risk slipping up? There are a few in-universe explanations offered. 1. Control. He's steering the investigation. Okay, but he's also inserting himself into places the police aren't, meaning he's taking unnecessary risks just to emotionally gaslight people. 2. Thrill-seeking. Plausible for a sociopath, sure, but the game doesn't establish Shelby as someone who enjoys risk or adrenaline. He's written as paternal and reserved, until the script flips. 3. Self-justification. He's soothing his guilt. A fair explanation if the game gave us internal monologue, dreams, or any glimpse into his headspace. Instead, Shelby becomes whatever the scene needs: sympathetic, cunning, regretful, or ruthless, without a consistent psychological through line. That's not a character study, that's patchwork plotting. And again, it only works if you don't ask how this man, who's actively committing murders and then collecting his own evidence trail, manages to walk out of every home with a key clue no one else thought to turn in. Shelby isn't investigating, he's cleaning up, disguised as grief counseling. Now, let's talk about what happens when you go back, because when a game has 20 plus different endings, it's begging you to replay. But on a second playthrough, the game dares you to track the evidence. Look, it says, he was going back to the families to recover clues that could tie him to the murders. And it's technically true, Scott Shelby is returning to families, collecting items, and eventually burning them. But here's the problem. That was already blatantly clear in the first playthrough. The game literally shows you the scene where Shelby torches his collected evidence, so on a second run, when you get to the part where he was cleaning up after himself, it's not a twist, it's just confirmation of something the game already screamed at you. It doesn't deepen the mystery, it just makes you realize how little you actually got to participate in solving it. You weren't being misled, you were being actively kept in the dark. And then there's Manfred. Oh, sweet clock-fixing, typewriter-loving Manfred. You're with Shelby the entire time. You walk into the shop, you control Shelby, he chats with Manfred before Manfred heads to the back, and suddenly, Manfred's dead. At first, it's a mystery, but the reveal scene shows Scott bashing Manfred's head in with one of those heavy, ironic plot writers. And it hits you. That scene never actually happened the first time. You were there. You were pressing buttons. You were Scott Shelby. So what gives? Constructively speaking, this is where the game breaks its own rules. It asks the player to identify with the characters, to embody them, and then gaslights you. The game inserts events after the fact, asking you to emotionally invest in actions you were never allowed to witness or control. It's retroactive narrative sleight of hand. Think of it this way. Imagine watching a magician perform a card trick. Then, afterward, he shows you security footage revealing that he swapped the deck when you blinked. Impressive? Maybe. Honest storytelling? Debatable. That's what happens here. The game never shows Shelby as guilty until it's done lying to you. And when it's finally honest, it rewrites events in a way that directly contradicts your experience. It's less aha and more wait, were we even playing the same game? That's all for the main characters. Let's put it all together. Let's say you want to build a house. You start with 4 walls. Each wall is built by a different contractor. One's an avant-garde sculptor, one's an ex-cop with rage issues, one's a sleep-deprived journalist who may or may not believe in ethics, and one is just a guy who can't remember where he parked his trauma. You don't give them blueprints. You just say, make it dramatic. That's Heavy Rain. Heavy Rain wants to be a grounded, emotional thriller. You're meant to feel tension, empathy, and moral conflict. And for a while, it works. The opening sets the tone. The characters might feel believable, and the rain is, objectively, heavy. But then, things start happening. Ethan Mars blacks out and wakes up clutching a paper dog like he's in a haunted origami support group. At no point does he stop to say, hey, maybe I'm not mentally capable of things right now. Instead, he quietly panics like a suburban dad who's misplacing both his child and his criminal record. Madison Paige, a journalist by trade, finds this fugitive in a rundown motel, watches him have a panic attack, and thinks, this feels like a safe place to stay. She then continues investigating him by sharing his bed. Either she's following a lead, or she's writing the worst true crime article of all time. Norman Jayden, our FBI agent, wears sunglasses that can analyze pollen, but can't recognize basic human behavior. He scans evidence with sci-fi precision, but collapses emotionally when a suspect frowns. Also, he's addicted to a drug we're never told anything about. It's a great metaphor for the writing. experimental, unexplained, and slightly shaky under pressure. Then there's Scott Shelby, private eye, asthmatic, and deeply concerned about a series of murders he personally committed. He consoles victim families like he's never heard of the word mirror, and the game lets him do this with complete sincerity. It's not a plot twist, it's narrative gaslighting. The issue isn't that these characters have flaws, it's that they operate under entirely different logic systems, yet we're supposed to believe they live in the same timeline. I want to try to be constructive. The real problem isn't that Heavy Rain lacks good ideas. It has too many, but instead of tying them together, it quarantines them in separate genres. Ethan is in a psychological horror, Madison is in a noir romance, Norman is in a procedural crime drama with light cyberpunk, Scott is in a morality play with bonus cardio. These aren't perspectives, they're conflicting design documents. Rather than being built around a central theme or emotional arc, the story is reverse engineered from a twist. Scott is the killer. That twist is the destination, and every character is bent, stretched, or ignored to make sure they don't get there too soon. This is why Ethan's blackouts have no purpose except misdirection. Madison's choices feel random because she's being repositioned, not developed. Norman misses obvious leads because the writers needed him confused, not competent. Scott behaves like he has selective amnesia, not a secret. None of this is about character, it's about scaffolding. You're not watching people make choices, you're watching writers pull strings behind a velvet curtain. A grounded thriller doesn't need to be probable, it just needs to feel plausible. That's the trick. But here, plausibility is treated like an optional side quest. Let's walk through a logic audit. Would a father endure torture trials to save his son? Possibly. Would he think he might be the killer and never say it out loud? Doubtful. Would a journalist fall in love with that man in 2 days while suspecting he's a murderer? Not likely. Would an FBI agent ignore massive holes in a suspect's story because his sunglasses are busy doing CSI cosplay? Hard pass. Would the killer investigate his own crime scenes without any clear goal or benefit other than to fool the audience? Only if the writers prioritize twist over truth. The problem here isn't suspension of disbelief, it's the slow erosion of trust. The game tells you your choices matter. It tells you the story is realistic. But behind the curtain, it's setting fire to the rulebook and hoping you're too busy pressing X not to notice. It's also important to understand why this worked for so many people at the time. Heavy Rain was, functionally, a tech demo. An ambitious one, yes, but still, a showcase. In 2010, seeing characters cry in real-time facial animation was a revelation. Individual raindrops mattered. Lighting mattered. Polygonal cheekbones mattered. You didn't question the plot holes because your brain was too busy saying, "Wow, I've never seen this many pores." Ethan's incoherent arc? You missed it, too distracted by his detailed eye reflections. Madison's complete lack of tools as a journalist? That's okay. Remember all the water droplets in the shower? Scott's emotional manipulation of victims? It looked sincere, and on PS3, that was enough. But now, the graphics are dated, the pores aren't as impressive, the illusion is gone, and what's left, when you strip away the motion capture and water shaders? It's a story that buckles under its own contradictions. Heavy Rain set out to be a revolutionary narrative experience. In many ways, it was, but in terms of storytelling integrity, it operates like a magician who forgot the trick halfway through, and then blamed the audience for noticing. Each character plays by different rules. Their arcs serve a twist, not a truth. And once the twist lands, you're left asking, was any of this real or just well rendered? The game doesn't fall apart because it lacks effort, it falls apart because it prioritized reaction over reason. It was designed to feel smart long enough for people to finish, recommend, and forget. And now that the graphics are no longer pulling focus, the story is all that's left. Unfortunately, that story was never the point. They say the devil is in the details, but here, the details were outsourced, and the devil forgot to show up. Thanks for watching.